Hey, good afternoon. It's Thursday, everybody. We're on the backside of the week. It's day 88. It's a beautiful day, man. It's still chilly as hell out here. Gosh, I have some sobering news. Listen, I don't know this gentleman myself personally, but I know of him. His name is Judge Frank Caprio. If the name sounds familiar, maybe the picture that accompanies this video will help. Judge Frank Caprio is a retired judge, and he had a TV show, and I can't remember. It wasn't the People's Court. Maybe that's the name of it. But he was this sitting judge with a tremendous amount of compassion for the people that came through the courtroom. And over the years, over the decades, he ruled his courtroom much differently than other judges do. And he was such a man of extraordinary compassion. He would give people breaks, second, third, fourth chances. Just a very kind, gentle, warm individual. And when you listen to him speak and you looked at him, his generosity, his authentism for loving one another just oozes out of his pores. He was just recently diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and he's taken to the social media just to share his experience. Obviously, it doesn't look good, and he's fighting the good fight. But he reminded us today in this Instagram post of just how much we need to love one another, and be kind to other people, and just realize how fortunate we are to have this present. And that's the presence that you're in. That's definitely a play on words. God gave us this present of today, not to worry about tomorrow, not to worry about yesterday, because yesterday's gone and tomorrow's not guaranteed. It also reminded me of a situation back in the day in the 90s. I worked for a company now called Verizon Wireless, but I had a sales manager by the name of Brian Schwartz. Brian Schwartz may be one of the best salespeople I've ever worked with. And his father, Brian was a single child, only child, and his father was one of the two, if I'm not mistaken, founders for Compaq Computer. So Brian's family was very well to do, but he was a hardworking guy, did really well, and has done really well in his career. During the time that Brian and I worked together, his dad was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, just like Judge Frank Caprio. And unfortunately, his father passed away. The diagnosis and the recovery rate's not really good with that disease. It's a brutal cancer. And Brian, I remember Brian telling me stories about his dad. He'd often come into my office, and one of the stories he told me was very heartwarming. He says, my dad's obviously worth a lot of money, and me being an only child, he says, we were just coming out of an economic recession that was brutal. The stock market just crashed. Brian said, I just got off the phone with my dad, and I said, what'd your dad say? And he says, well, my dad had good news and bad news. And he says, the bad news is, he says, son, I've lost half my net worth due to this economic crash. I lost half my net worth. And his son said, well, what's the good news? His dad says, well, Brian, it was your half. I'll never forget that story. I think I might have met his dad once in passing briefly. He seemed like a very nice gentleman. But, I was really remorse. This was something that happened 30 years ago. And I remember when Brian was pouring through the internet, doing research with his mom, trying to find even the most newest techniques that they were experimenting with to try to cure and find a way to reverse pancreatic cancer and cure these people. And Brian asked me one time for some time off, and he took some time off. Then he came back, and I remember him asking for extended time off. I'm not saying maybe 1, 2, or 3 months, whatever it was. And I had to go to a higher level of authority in the company, to get that approval. But for whatever reason, we weren't able to grant it to him. And I don't remember the exact reasons, but there was business reasons for it. And sometimes when business and personal issues come to play, they don't always meet at a happy place. It was very, very difficult to tell Brian I couldn't give him that extended leave of absence he was looking for. And years later, I felt a tremendous amount of guilt because I was a young manager, and I should have fought for Brian more. I don't know if that would have made a difference, but I remember calling Brian about a year or two ago and getting him on the phone and telling him, just basically asking for him to forgive me. I said, Brian, I know how close your dad was. I shared the story with him. I said, I remember that story you told me about the net worth thing. And I said, I just want you to know, Brian, I dropped the ball on that one. I should have fought harder. And I told him I'm not sure if it would have made a difference, but at least I wouldn't have been wrestling with this notion for years that maybe I didn't fight hard enough for you. And I know, you know, he was very sincere and kind and forgiving me. And he's told me how much it meant to him that I made that call. So, you know, I just want to take this moment to remind you all that, you know, there are people out there that are struggling with diseases, and maybe their days are numbered, but they're fighting the good fight, the heroic battle, and love one another. You know, pick up the phone and tell somebody you care for them that you haven't told that to in a long time, and be brave, be strong, and go get yours today. Bye-bye.